Now, how would you like to be featured on a podcast where you can actually get into the ears of your dream audience, your target audience, and to build that know, like, and trust factor? So many people now are not only listening to podcasts, starting to podcast. I mean, you're listening to one right now, but also figuring out how they can get onto a podcast. And it's much easier than you think. Now, we know that podcasts are increasing more than 10% year over year. There are more podcasts being started than ever. And it's your chance. Let it be this year that you finally pitch and get onto a podcast. It's going to do so much for your business, for your confidence, and what you imagine is possible for yourself. Now, obviously, we can go into all the ins and outs of the podcast, but this episode is going to be focusing on how you can pitch and get into that podcast. Now, if you haven't listened to the episode about my signature pitching framework, the CPR method, I encourage you to go back to episode 2 because that is going to step-by-step outline the pitch method that is simple and proven to get the yes from the editor, because it's a value-driven conversation that I have come up with from pitching thousands of times. And it's the exact same framework that I use every day in my business, whether it's to get into a podcast, an outlet, speaking, what have you. So make sure you go and listen to that. So now that you know about the CPR method, I'm going to show you a little bit about the 3-step method on how you can get onto a podcast. Step 1 is to make your podcast media list. What I mean is I want you to research what keywords and themes you want to speak on. Now, unlike a lot of the other pitching that we talk about, whether it's in my masterclass or in my Facebook community, it's okay to be a little bit fluffier when you pitch to podcasts because it's a way for you to talk about your story in longer form. So research what keywords, what themes, maybe it's something to do with thought leadership. Maybe it's something to do with women of color and our first generation immigrant entrepreneurial journeys, whatever, what have you, and focus on podcasts that focus on these themes. And if you are stuck on how to find your targeted media list, the PR Starter Pack comes with over 1,000 podcasts and the contact info for hosts and exactly how you can find them for instant download. But if you're just starting out and DIYing your media list, I want you to think about maybe 3 to 4 different keywords. So if you are someone who is a caretaker for someone with disabilities, and you can maybe speak about caregiving and what it means to be a caregiver. If you're a single mom, it could be about a podcast that you want to be on that has to do with parenting. There are so many podcasts out there for so many different audiences. You just want to be specific on who you're pitching to. So I recommend 2, 3, maybe 4 keywords. But remember, you want to niche down and you want to be able to niche down so you can be an expert or a thought leader in that niche. Remember, if you speak to everyone, you end up speaking to no one. So what are the keywords or angles that you can speak on? Maybe it's something about e-commerce. Maybe it's something about English as a first language. Or maybe it's the fact that you're the first person in your family to start a business. I mean, there are podcasts for every single thing. So think about what your target podcast list is. Now, number 2 is using the CPR method. Again, that's going to be in episode 2. I want you to write your podcast pitch. Now, this is the signature method I use to write all of the pitches, whether it's for podcasts or speaking or anything. And it has resulted in me getting into 30 plus podcasts in the last 6 months. And it's helped so many entrepreneurs who are afraid to press that send button. It's allowed them to realize that it is possible to be interviewed and that they are worthy to be seen, heard, and valued. So make sure you go back and listen to that. But CPR method stands for credibility, point of view, and relevance. And the reason why the method works is because it allows you to go from a very self-serving, me, look at me kind of pitch to saying, I have a story that's going to impact people. It might not be perfect. I might not have the best, most polished website, but I have information that can give people insight, that can inspire, that can spark curiosity. So that is a value-driven conversation that is the CPR method. It positions you as a thought leader that you truly are. Because let's be honest, we're more than just the products and services we sell. We have a bigger mission. We have a story that inspires. And every entrepreneur that I've met has a story to share. And that story is very inspiring. Another thing about the CPR method is that it allows you to feel confident to pitch without sounding salesy. Because again, you're not selling your product. You're basically saying, hey, I can help your audience understand this better. Or, hey, this is my experience. And I know a lot of people are struggling with this. And I'm happy to give a little bit more insight about how I dealt with these struggles. So again, it's making you sound like an expert, someone who has information, someone who can draw the bridge and create understanding and inspire instead of selling your product. So that is the CPR method. And I go through exactly what that is with actual examples. So make sure you go back to the episode and listen to it. And if you want to see many different pitches of the CPR method that got featured, make sure you go to gloriachowpr.com. That's CHOUPR.com/masterclass. Okay. So step 1 is I want you to make your podcast list. Number 2 is write your pitch using the CPR method. Number 3 is I want you to repurpose and share. So after you've pitched to your podcast, and remember, follow-up is key. So I want you to email them on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. And I want you to follow up with them, not only by emailing them again every week, but also on social media. So the podcast host, where are they on social media? It might be as simple as sending a direct message on Instagram or LinkedIn. You can compliment them on something that they did recently, and you can say, hey, I loved your interview that you did with this guest. Now, here's a tip. You don't want to pitch to a podcast that has just interviewed someone who covers your industry. So for example, if I'm pitching for myself and I'm pitching about small business PR and how small businesses can get into a podcast and they can get featured, I'm probably going to want to make sure that that podcast host didn't have a PR expert in the last few months, because they're just going to say, I just had someone, so maybe next quarter. So you want to do research. Research is so important. It tells the podcast host that you genuinely care and you're not just using them as a vehicle for you to build your brand. So that might be listening to a few episodes. And if you don't have time to listen to the whole episode, feel free to fast forward. Feel free to read the reviews. Feel free to even have your assistant give you a summary. And here's another pro tip. You want to make sure that you give them a review. Podcast hosts, no matter how big they are, no matter how many hundreds or thousands of fans they have, they care if someone leaves them a review. So if you leave them a 5-star review, if you want to take a screenshot of it and actually put it in the email and say, hey, I gave you a 5-star review. I really love the discussion you had with X, Y, and Z. I love the way you interview and what you stand for. That is going to serve you so well. So that's another tip. And in terms of pitching, I always talk about subject lines. So how can you make your subject line very specific and to their audience? So you don't want the subject line to be potential podcast guest, my name. You don't want to put your name. You want to tell them exactly why you're pitching and what is the value add. So for me, the subject line is not Gloria Chow, potential podcast guest. They don't know who I am. They don't care. So the subject line instead that I use to get onto the podcast are helping small business owners hack their own PR and without any budget, or helping bootstrap entrepreneurs get featured with a proven 3-step framework. Those are all the subject lines that I've used to get onto 30 plus podcasts. So think about how you can be so specific when you write your pitch, when you write your subject line. And remember, you're only as good as your subject line. So make sure that your subject line is super relevant to right now, that it's concise, and that it's valuable. So you don't want to put your name. You don't want to put the word pitch. You don't want to put potential guest. They already know that. So that's step number 2 is write your pitch. And I also wrote a blog post all about writing your pitch using the CPR method. Just go to gloriachowpr.com and click on resources and tips, and you can read that. Now, number 3 is after you've been on a podcast, so many people come to me after they use the methods and get onto a podcast, and they all say, that was so much fun, Gloria. That was so much less daunting and intimidating than I thought. And they all just feel so good about it. And they're like, I cannot wait to get onto more podcasts and connect with my audience. So now that you've actually gotten onto a podcast, what do, right? Step 3 is you want to repurpose and share. Remember, the podcast doesn't end when you get off of the Zoom recording or whatever kind of recording software. No, that's just the beginning. You want to make sure that you can ask the host to share your website, give them the links. You want to have a call to action, and you want to prepare some speaking points. So for example, what are the frameworks or the actionable takeaways? What are the examples of what you're going to share? So for me, it's the 3-step CPR framework that's helped thousands of entrepreneurs get featured. So for you, what is the framework? What is your value add? Now, what are examples that can create vulnerability, that can help you create that know, like, and trust factor? So for me, it's about the fact that I never studied journalism and I never worked at an agency. So I was rejected literally thousands of times. And it was through that rejection that I came up with my method, because I still don't belong in a cool kids club. So what is that hero story? And so having the framework, having the examples, you're not just telling people, you're showing them. And that makes so much for a better visualization than just you telling them, here's what I did, here's what I did, here's what I did, right? You want to make sure that you can tell it in a story format. So you really get to paint a picture about why it matters. So after you've gone on to the podcast, you want to repurpose and share it. So that's giving the podcast host the links to your social media, to whatever it is you're promoting, whether it's a webinar or an announcement or an event or what have you. You want to make sure that it's in there in the show notes, because that is what's going to be indexed on Google. And guess what? It's going to do amazing things for your SEO. Podcasts are SEO friendly. They're searchable, and it's so much better than paying thousands of dollars for an ad. Because if people can listen to you for 30 minutes, think about the know, like, and trust factor that's going to build. And there's definitely no way you can accomplish that with an ad. That is why it's so important to start this process now and to pitch and get into a podcast. So back to the repurpose and sharing. Once the host has your website, your social links, think about how you can turn short clips of your recording into an audiogram or a short clip on video that you can put onto Instagram and TikTok, or repurpose it into a short YouTube video. Those are all ways to expand the life cycle of the podcast. Now, a lot of times podcast hosts record not just audio, but video. So ask them for the original file and ask them if they themselves are willing to share the short clips that they will use to promote the episode. Now, I know this is very common for all the episodes I've been on. The podcast host has their team actually take clips of our interview and turn it into audiograms. So it's as easy as you saying, hey, do you mind sending that over? And that way you can cross promote, because it's a win-win for both you and the host to cross promote and give visibility to that podcast episode. It's a win-win for all. So let's just keep that repurposing, that cycle going to maximize the lifetime. Now, it's literally, the possibilities are endless when it comes to repurposing it. What I do as well is not only do I get a short clip from the host, I put it onto Instagram, I tag them, I write the caption. I also turn it into a blog post, because again, blog posts are searchable. So your Instagram may not be searchable. It might fill a different need. It serves your Instagram audience, but think about how you can keep maximizing your SEO, how you can be discoverable. So podcasts in and of itself are discoverable, but what about turning it into a blog post? So it could be you writing a short blog post and embedding the video or embedding the audio and dropping the links of what you're trying to promote. It could be you asking your intern or your assistant to listen to the episode and write a short summary of it and put it onto your blog. That's what I'm having my paid intern do, is to write blogs from the podcast episodes. So when this is done right, one podcast alone can supply enough content for an entire month. So how is that for a win-win? Now, if you're looking for a step-by-step way of how to pitch with do's and don'ts, I encourage you to go onto my website. I have a podcast freebie where everything that I'm talking about now is in a PDF format. And you can see it step-by-step, the CPR method, step 1, step 2, and step 3. Just go to gloriachowpr.com and you'll be able to see it. Or you can DM me on Instagram, and that's at gloriachowpr. I'm always so happy to talk about podcasts because it's literally the way that I built my business. I was able to build my business, my SEO, my credibility, and be searchable, not to mention build a mailing list from getting onto 30 plus podcasts. And it's still the same fundamental CPR pitching method that helped me get there. Now, I want to leave you with some do's and don'ts. And this is compiled from what hosts look for. And I actually went back to all of the hosts that interviewed me and I asked them, hey, what are some do's and don'ts? What are some things that really irk you? And what are some things that you really like? So grab a piece of paper, because this is exactly from their point of view. So here are some do's. What podcast hosts really like is they want you to be a part of the future and not the past. So for example, pitch them a story about what's going to happen, what your predictions are. And again, if you remember, predictions are a part of the CPR method in point of view. Having a point of view means that you're able to make a prediction and give insights. And guess what? Experts have point of view. So what is going to happen in the future? So, for example, pitch a story about how the fitness industry is changing after the pandemic, or how our views about marriage is changing. You want to be a part of the future and not the past. Another thing they love is you want to present yourself as an innovator in your field. So what is something that you do that's unconventional? So for me, it's the fact that I've never worked at an agency. I don't have any journalistic contacts, and I literally cold called my way to getting my clients into the New York Times and Wall Street Journal. So that is my unconventional approach. what is your unconventional approach? I know we all are innovative and disruptors because we would not be entrepreneurs if we didn't think that we had a more innovative way to solve a problem. So what is that? Present yourself as an innovator. Another thing they look out for is they want you to clearly state how you provide value to their audience. So remember, in the CPR method, the point of view is I love having it be 3 bullet points. So if you actually go to gloriachildpr.com/masterclass, you can see the CPR method in action step by step. And the point of view part in the CPR method is actually 3 bullet points. That makes the podcast host really delighted because it's not just blocks of text that you're sending. And it looks really great to have 3 bullet points. I'd rather read an email with bullet points than 5 paragraphs all day, every day. Another thing they love is focus on the pitch and what are the actionable takeaways. So again, it's okay to be more fluffy and more thought leadership-y on the podcast, but you still want to include in the pitch, what are the actionable takeaways? So it could be something like 3 things founders must avoid from a financial point of view to have positive cash flow. I'm just giving you an example. So for example, if you are a financial coach, what are the 3 actionable takeaways, or 4 or 5? So that's what I mean by it has to be actionable. It has to be tangible because their audience is looking for something that they can apply to their life. It's important to share your story. Of course it is. But without actionable takeaways, without bullet points, without something that's tangible and something that can be realized, it's not going to be as good of a pitch. Another thing is they want you to reference any common connections or maybe networks that you have in common. Look, it doesn't mean that you need to have any common connections. I never started with any connections. But if you know of someone that maybe they've interviewed before, or you've maybe gone to the same conference, or you've heard this podcast host speak, you might want to mention that. It shows that you are in the same universe, that maybe you have some things in common, and it just brings them a little bit closer to your world. Now, another thing is in the credibility part of the CPR method, it's totally okay in the pitch to reference any publications or written works or anywhere you've gotten featured or any other podcasts you've been on or any other press mentions. Now, I want this to be hyperlinked. Again, no attachments. This is rule number 1 is don't add attachments. A, because it triggers your spam filter and it means it's going straight into the spam folder. It's not going to get read. And B, it's unnecessary. Here is another thing is you want to create an eye-catching subject line. And I have a training inside of the starter pack for that. But again, I always say this, you're only as good as your subject line. And if your subject line is not good, your whole email is not going to get opened. So what is the most relevant way you can convey what their audience will get from the episode? So for me, the subject line I use is the 3-step method for founders to hack their own PR. It tells the podcast host who I'm speaking to, who I'm helping, and what they can get out of it. Another thing I always recommend, and if you've watched my PR masterclass, you know this as well, is you want to install an email tracking device. Now, everything that we do is being tracked anyway, so why not have data about whether or not your email is being opened or not? So there's a lot of them out there on the internet. They range from free to more expensive. And whether you use Chrome or Outlook, it's all different. But if you just Google email tracking device, it can be as cheap as $50 a year, or it could even be free, but it gives you data so that you can know whether or not your emails are being opened, because that's going to give you the confidence to pitch again, and again. And remember, the number 1 rule of pitching is that the beauty and the success is in the follow-up. I don't know any founders who've pitched the first time and gotten featured. It's all from the follow-up. And so you got to keep following up and you got to know whether or not your email is being open so that you can feel confident to pitch again. And don't forget to also follow up once a week, every week. And don't forget to reach out to them on social media. This is a part of my strategy and a part of why the media list I provide in the PR Starter Pack has such detailed information on all of their social media so that you can connect with them on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Facebook, and Instagram, what have you. Again, an email is just simply not enough. Now, here are some don'ts from all the years that I've pitched. One thing is, I understand that there's a pandemic going on, but don't just overuse the pandemic angle to try to relate it if it's a far stretch. So for example, if you're pitching about something that's very fluffy and you're saying, well, people are struggling and they're seeking comfort, and that's why my comfort wear brand resonates with people during COVID, that's not specific enough. And it comes off as a little bit like you're taking advantage. So I know that the pandemic angle, there's a huge opportunity because there's so many different points of view and so many changes in the industry. But make sure if you're going to relate it to the pandemic angle that you want to be super specific. Remember what I said about peeling away the layers of an onion. I think about the way to pitch as the most obvious thing is the top layer of the onion. Anyone can pitch it. It's kind of like duh. But founders who get featured are the ones that are not afraid to do the work and maybe have their eyes sting a little bit and peel away the layers of an onion to get to that really juicy core, the one that's super powerful and has that flavor punch that's going to make your meal super delicious. That's what I try to get founders to do when they're writing their pitch. So it might be you sitting down and brainstorming and trying different ways to look at how you can peel away the layers of an onion to give something that is unique, that's interesting. Now, another thing I don't want you to do is I don't want you to include the word pitch or your name or your company name in the subject line, because guess what? The host doesn't know you. So it's not going to catch their eye and they're going to think, well, this is not for me, delete. Another thing is compliments are great. We're all human. We love compliments, but don't give baseless or tacky compliments that you can tell is a copy and paste. So don't do something like, I love your podcast. Have you thought about featuring me? No, that's not going to work because it's basically your way of using a copy and paste method to get their attention. And they can definitely sniff out that it's total BS. What I want you to do instead is do research on their previous episodes. Remember what I said is if they've had someone on their podcast that does something similar to you, you probably don't want to pitch to them because they just had someone who is very similar to you, right? So I wouldn't pitch for an episode if someone just had a PR expert on their show. So that's what I mean by doing the research. And after you do the research, it's totally okay to say, I love the podcast episode you did with this guest. So if you want to give compliments, make sure it's specific and it's based in fact. Tell them why they should have you on their podcast. It could be something like, hey, you help small businesses with marketing. I saw that you haven't had anyone who does small business PR. So have you thought about an episode about helping your founders not only do marketing, but also do their own PR so they can get that visibility, that credibility, that authority, right? Something like that. One last thing I want you to leave with is it's all about mindset, right? It's 80% mindset. I have written pitches for startups with millions of dollars in funding and also for founders who are literally bootstrapping in their garage, who don't have any money, who are not launched. And how they get different results is not based on how much money they have or how many VIP connections they have. It's what they think is possible for themselves. So that's what I mean. Do not feel discouraged because building relationships with podcast hosts takes time, but the benefits of being able to share your story, of being able to repurpose your content, of being able to get onto more podcasts, because chances are that podcast host is going to know other podcast hosts that you're a great fit for. It's worth the work to keep practicing and pitching. So that's what I mean by don't get discouraged. And the beauty is in the follow-up. I cannot tell you how many times founders got featured because they just went a little bit past their comfort zone and pressed the send button more often than they like. And it led to so many things. I actually had someone turn a failure into a Times article because she actually pitched in the DMs using the CPR method. And she is a part of my PR starter pack community. And the magazine editor said, this is not a great fit for me right now. And then my client was like, okay, well, do you know someone this would be a great fit for? And the person on the other end, the editor was like, you know what? I actually have somebody at Time who's writing this. Let me see if she's still doing this. And guess what? She didn't get back to my client. My client actually reached out again on LinkedIn and said, hey, just following up with you because you told me that you were going to see if your colleague at Time Magazine was going to write something. And guess what? The editor said, oh my God, thank you so much for reminding me. I just got swamped with so much work and I was tasked by my editor to do another project. But thank you for following up with me. You know what? She actually said she is seeking comments about this industry and would love to interview you. And that led to her Times feature. So I cannot tell you how important mindset is, especially when you are feeling discouraged, when you feel like there's a whole ocean out there and you can't compete. You got to get yourself into the place of confidence, into the place of abundance, because true miracles start to happen when you act from that space. Now, if you want a comprehensive podcast list with all of the hosts, their contact info, where they are on social media, so much more, my PR starter pack is the go-to PR agency in your pocket that gives you instant access to the most powerful PR media list, winning pitch templates. I don't care if you're trying to get into a gift guide or a podcast or if you're a coach. It works for any industry. and it's at a fraction of the cost of an agency. And every single day we have PR Starter Pack members sharing their wins in the Facebook group and helping other people do the same. So this is your reminder that you do not need permission to pitch your story, that you don't need to reach a certain level of quote unquote success to be able to be interviewed on a podcast. You deserve to share your story with more people, because guess what? There are people out there who can benefit from your story in its current form, even if it's imperfect, even if you don't feel ready. Now, I encourage you to go to my website, to watch the masterclass, and to be a part of my Facebook community where we can help you, can give you support. And if you are ready to take the next step, join the PR Starter Pack, because I really believe that it's all about having a turnkey strategy that has been proven to work and just applying the method and getting the results. That's going to allow you to not only feel like your brand is worth it, that it's credible, that it's legitimate, that you're going to feel like, wow, I am here to make an impact. And it starts with me saying yes to going bigger with your message. So on that, my friends, thank you for listening. And I look forward to having you back here next week.